Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Ask How About. I'm your host, Pranjay Reddy, and yeah, it's good to be back with another expert interview. I know you guys have seen me in the past couple of weeks, but this edition of it, well, I'm really excited for you guys to see what we have on in this episode. Now, first and foremost, we from Ask How About want to ensure that please do wear a mask when you go outside, and always please be safe and not for you, for your loved one. I want to say that every now and again, just because of the situation we are in right now. Usually, I'd be talking about how some countries are recovering from the pandemic and how they're coping with it, while the others are really in very big. Now, I'm not going to name those countries this week. I'm not going to say this is all a big conspiracy theory because it is very odd that in the past 1 year we have many confirmed UFO sightings, and the Pentagon confirmed it, by the way, and we think it's not related to the pandemic. And I know all the conspiracy theorists watching it are going like, the man's got a point. But I'm not going to do that this week. What I am going to do is do a social service by making you guys watch this very small, very funny clip which I found the past week.
Oh my God, tell me what to do. Wee, wee. Oh my God, wee.
Now that we're all laughing and in some entertainment mode, back to reality. Now, this week we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. Now, why do I want to talk about that this particular week? Well, it's a good question, honestly. Because we, as a world right now, are in a very tricky yet opportunistic financial situation. It is no secret that the pandemic has really affected our economy and it's also affected our everyday day-to-day life. This includes our businesses. So a lot of businesses have lost money in the past year, and yet a lot of new businesses are starting to come up. Now, there's some good news and bad news to this. Yes, the bad news is a lot of us don't have a lot of money right now, and it's very hard to make new income. But the good news is, historically speaking, the best entrepreneurs and businesses are born of financial strain. So I find it very interesting as to what makes them successful compared to many millions of others who try. So in doing so, I found this very interesting field of study, research entrepreneurship. And that is really cool if you ask me. And I did not know much about it. And if you are one of those people who does know a lot about it, I'm pretty sure you're this guy. Look at him. Look at him. I mean, this guy infuriates me. I mean, dude, like, give me my space, all right? Like, I'm shooting a monologue here. Like, you can put your hand down right now. What's wrong with him? On a serious note, it is pretty interesting to see a research field in entrepreneurship, which a lot of people, let's agree, do not think of entrepreneurship as something theoretical. But there is a lot to it. And I also thought it'd be fun if you can find out what successes those people, when they were in financial strain, did to ensure that their businesses and they were successful as entrepreneurs. So I thought it'd be good if we revisit or rather look into all these aspects of businesses. And so we contacted Dr. Raj Shankar, who is a research entrepreneur himself and who also mentors a lot of entrepreneurs. So we had a little chat, and hey, hopefully it'll help you become a success. Take a look. Dr. Raj, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Pranay. It's nice to be on the show with you. And it's been a kind of a strange start to this new year, but
Really?
it's still, yeah, better.
Really? I thought 2021 was going to be the redemption year, where everything just magically vanishes off after 2020. Didn't that happen to you?
I think, yeah, it looks like we've been hoping against hope. But I'm sure we're all, as the eternal optimists, hoping that something will change.
I
Let's
really
hope.
hope so. No, I know I'm cynical here, but I do really hope things get better. So let's start with your definition of entrepreneurship. How do you define entrepreneurship?
As an empirical phenomenon, it is something that happens in the real world. It's some kind of action, it's some kind of practice that takes place, and then people can look at it from a variety of angles. But from a larger perspective, I think a few of these definitions have really stayed with me over time. One of them is actually this idea that entrepreneurship is really creation of new means ends combinations. That is, yeah, kind of the least technical way to say it from an economic angle. Or it could be looked at as the pursuit of opportunity without really concern over what resources the individual controls today or has access to today. And the third larger idea is that it's actually a set of practices about either creation or discovery of opportunities. So some of the key words here that I really think a lot about is, one, practices. What kind of practices are these? Two, what are we really creating here? Three, are we, and what is this word called opportunity? Because everyone keeps using it all the time. So my definition or my view to this is it's a set of practices um, which is used to create new means ends combinations or discover existing opportunities in a market setting.
But some things you mentioned there which are really key. It is a lot of real world application. And I think more people often associate entrepreneurship with just businesses which occur in the real world. But I don't think people appreciate or even know the theory behind it or the research that goes behind it. And I just want you to speak a bit about it. Why do you think this part of entrepreneurship is not does not even exist in people's minds?
I think that's a good question. So there are really two parts to your question here. I think one is why do people associate entrepreneurship to kind of business? And the second is why do people not really know much about entrepreneurship, even though we research so much about it?
Yeah.
Is why do people really think entrepreneurship is business? Because that's what gets noticed and written about in the popular media, I think. So, for example, you pick every newspaper and then you talk about, say, Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, or you talk about Mukesh Ambani or some people like that. So it's really the Bansals and so on. So I think we write so much and we've made it so heroic that everybody thinks, yeah, if you start a business and you become rich and famous and then you are an entrepreneur, that's I think a very narrow view to it, as you may have reflected from the definition that I gave. It's a kind of a larger phenomenon. Coming to the second part of your question, I think entrepreneurship should be thought of as new venture creation. And then you see that there are three elements here. There's something that ought to be new, and this newness can vary. It can be new to just your locality, and then it can be new to the world. So it's a large range. Second, it's some kind of venturing. So venturing kind of gives us this feeling that you are entering a realm where we do not know much about. So it's like you have to embrace this idea of uncertainty and ambiguity and things like that. So venturing by default brings this perspective in. And the third part is creation. So which means which also hints at action. I mean, it's not somebody who's just sitting and thinking about a new state. It's somebody who's trying to create a new desired future state. So using this as a base, a lot of research has been done, but unfortunately, a lot of this has not been translated into forms that practitioners can read and digest. So let me give you an example. So you all know, I mean, a lot of people at least know about this lean startup thing that's going around by this. So there are this, it's like a lean movement almost. So it's like, it's one way of doing entrepreneurship. We totally agree. It's practical, it's hands-on, and so on. But what we don't realize is that it's built on several decades of research, which has been published in the journals, say since 1970s or 80s. People have been toying with these questions, but somebody was able to kind of make this into simple steps, frameworks, tools that the daily practitioner can put to use quickly. So the reason is, yeah. So what I want to highlight here is that somebody took the effort to translate a lot of hardcore academic research into something that's understandable, easy for the practitioner. The reason why many people have no access to this rich academic literature is because we aren't doing enough of this translation work, translation from academic language to something that's easy to access for the practitioner. I think it's increasing, which is a good sign. But yeah, we need a lot more of it, I think.
I think that comes down. I think there's a common trend I see facing with any research field, for that matter, be entrepreneurship, be literature, or even science. Communication is not there to which
Yeah.
can spread that word, and that's why I think research communication is far important. And that's why I want you to talk a little bit before we move on further about what exactly goes on in research and entrepreneurship.
So being a social science, I think we have to understand that theory and practice go hand in hand.
Mhm.
It's not like the natural sciences or the the physical sciences. So researchers have asked about why do some people get into entrepreneurship and why do some people not get into it. Research has really explored, is it a nurture versus nature argument? Is it like people are born as entrepreneurs and then in which case education doesn't make any meaning? But that's kind of been discussed and debated enough. We've had nice research around how people can develop certain kind of mindsets which will make them more entrepreneurial in their actions. We've had very interesting research around the idea of passion, which comes up very often when we talk of entrepreneurship. So is passion good, bad? Is too much of it too bad, or what is it? So there's a lot
I
of
think
nice research around that.
I think passion can be argued for life. Is it good, bad?
Absolutely, yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you. Actually, uh, a lot of entrepreneurship research hinges on bigger life questions because it almost feels like it talks to that.
Research in entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily mean you're creating something new, like in most other research fields. You're actually trying to understand better, and I think that in of itself is creating something new. If you ask me, because when you understand something, why something's working, we can always build on that. And I think that's why it's very very important we do that. And so I do want to ask you then. So you must, having done research, or the field being having done research for years and years, you must know there are some practices which have always been successful compared to some others. And there's a reason why some businesses, not all, because we know millions of startups start every year, only like few hundred survive at the end of the fiscal year. There must be some practices they follow, which are the reason why they're successful. Are there any one or two practices which you think are the reason why some companies are successful and some are not?
I tried to find why some organizations thrive while others kind of, bear the brunt of disruptions and change. And I think one of the central facets that define these successful organizations is the ability to uh, kind of notice change.
Okay.
And I think it's a skill. It's something to be learned, deliberately put to practice. The ability to sense changes, because we know that change is the root for any new opportunity. If there are no changes, there are going to be no opportunities. So which means we it's good that we all have some change. But the ability is really to sense it and seize it. So what we realize here is that not all changes are worth pursuing. Some changes are worth pursuing, and this depends a little bit on, I think, the person and environment fit. So it's not like every opportunity is interesting to everybody. So, for example, waste is a big source of opportunity in today's world, right?
Yes.
Some people even say waste is actually the new resource, or waste is the new gold, and things like that. Or the new oil. But it doesn't appeal to everybody. A lot of people think, oh, waste, no, it's good. It's a serious social issue, but
Yeah.
not an entrepreneurial issue, right? So I think what really matters here is a person environment fit. So for does the change and the repercussions of the change that you notice matter to you, because that is important to take action. And second is, are you in the right environment to pursue that opportunity? So I think if there's anything that really is important, it's this, that we ought to find the opportunities or the changes that make sense to us personally. So we not just any opportunity, but what is important to us. And second is, are we in the right environment to kind of
Succeed.
exploit it or use it for a better so this is one thing I think I've really seen that good organizations do. So for example, of late, a lot of people are talking about, Microsoft has changed, and, it is not the old Microsoft under Satya Nadella and things like that. But what we fail to notice is that some of these organizations and leaders bring about new habits and practices. So for example, one of the things that Satya Nadella does in Microsoft is he's really opened up Microsoft to the world. It's no more the organization that's closed, working by itself. So the amount of collaboration that Microsoft was doing before Satya Nadella took over and after he took over, if you see, it's a huge change in behaviors. often for an organization, and it's really difficult to achieve something like that. So so and this is also the challenge with social science. Where do we say this is entrepreneurship and not some other subject? So I think it's a problem with the social world, right? So empirical phenomena don't like being boxed into nice concepts. Only theories do. So yeah, that's one thing. And the second is, I think it's also this idea of uh, goals. How do organizations set goals? So this is another stream that I've been very interested in, because what if you are very economically oriented? Your goals are all very economic. Then what kind of resourcing behaviors do you display? So for example, do you go only behind VCs and angels, or do you go behind, kind of grant money? And what are you more interested in, the change in the world, or generation of surplus? So these kind of dilemmas in the entrepreneur's mind influence how an organization survives or thrives in the longer term. So it's easy to say that purpose is more important than profits or surplus, but can companies sustain purpose over time? And what should we do for that?
So I think you mentioned a lot of key points where seizing the opportunity that comes due to change is the only way. So you have to be adaptable. So you can't just be stagnant. And thankfully, like you said, our society is very, very uh, drastic in change, and we are never stagnant. So I guess as for success, yeah, we need to do that. And one thing I want to mention is when you said waste is the new gold or oil, I do not think people really appreciate that in terms of general people, because I did an interview a few weeks ago with Mr. Sridhar, who's part of a waste management company. He talks about how much problems they're still facing. He talks about how many people are still just throwing shade at, like they're not even paying attention to it. And if we don't pay attention, we are gonna terribly suffer seriously. And that's actually been more complicated because of the pandemic. and
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you. It's so especially this whole idea of sustainability is suffering from as what a lot of people say, greenwashing problem. So it's like I think we just think that everything has to be washed and made clean, but that's not the way it is. I think
yeah.
we have to say that it's a change, and I think we need to look at the repercussions of that. I agree with you totally.
So because I just want to mention that because I mentioned that in that video as well, and I also want to mention that here because innovation is needed there, and a lot of people are needed there because we cannot survive without properly disposing or taking care of or segregating our waste. I just want
Yeah.
to make that point clear. Yeah. Now, one thing I want to talk about is you said an entrepreneur resourcefulness, right? How that person can assign value or see value in something which most people do not, and create value for that. I think this is where I think mainstream research and entrepreneurial research combine, because I often see, or rather, I often notice, and I think even you talked about this before. A lot of researchers who are into theory in terms of physics and biology or chemistry, they create devices or equipment for something, and they don't realize the value of it. That's when an entrepreneur can jump in and see that value and create a market for that. So talk about that a little bit. How much do you think licensing is important in today's day, and how much do you think an entrepreneur should look to see that as an avenue to create a new market for himself or for someone else?
So there is a large stream of research here in even trying to help some of these scientists and researchers commercialize their innovations. So that is one place, or that is one way to do it. And there they find that the more the scientist is willing to be open with his innovation, helps a lot more in reaching, um, a realization of the value that they want to create. Because what they notice is a lot of these scientists don't really get into make money. They're just happy producing new stuff, and usually this is triggered by sensing a problem in a specific place, usually a technological gap or something, and then they fill it. But when they start opening it up to other people, especially more entrepreneurial minds, these people can see multiple applications for the same
Right.
technology or invention. So I think one is them actually becoming entrepreneurs. That's one way. Them joining hands with entrepreneurial people and exploring ways to commercialize technology. That's another way. Or the third is what you said, licensing. And a lot of, I mean, it's surprising that a lot of IITs in India and universities, research-driven universities. We also have a lot of national research laboratories. Most of these people create new knowledge, and it just sits there. Unfortunately, entrepreneurs don't go there to look at the roasters and see if there is anything interesting to commercialize. And then they sit at home and think of ideas. I think the ideas are just sitting somewhere in one of those, TTO offices. So I think one is we need more active engagement between the, market-based entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial minds and these research centers. But I totally agree with you that this is one place that we ought to invest time and energy to develop, because this can change society a lot, because we do so much research anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it can, and it's not just that. It also makes people appreciate the value of science,
yeah,
because I also think part of the reason why it not just for communication, like you said, media coverage doesn't necessarily reach to pure hardcore researchers, and that means funding doesn't go there. That means there's not enough opportunity for researchers to innovate more than what they already have, and I think all of this can bring about a change, and I think that's why it's important that we look into it as a avenue. Well, I think that pretty much covers it all. But I do like to ask one final question, and I have to ask this because of the past year. Finally, I'd like to ask, how do you think the thought process of entrepreneurship has changed within the past year? Because people have been forced to do some crazy things to stay afloat, and a lot of people have gone under. So, how do you think the thought process has changed over the past year?
I think the pandemic is another source of change, and we have to see that this is a change which is forcing us to acknowledge the new reality. We I think a lot of people are trying to manage so that they can go back to the old normal, and return to normal as soon as possible. What we have to understand is that there is no old normal anymore. What is going to happen is we are now moving towards a new normal, and this new normal is going to be different. And therefore, I think we have to use entrepreneurship as a very potent tool to understand and sense this change. So, how quickly will entrepreneurs embrace this? Is the question. So we are, at least in research, we are now looking at interesting pieces of work around, rapid venture creation. So for example, if you have a hurricane or you have a bushfire, destroying society, how do people reorganize themselves collectively, quickly, and kind of get society back on its feet? So which is a kind of entrepreneurship, because there is no value, there's almost nothing, you're now reconstructing the whole thing. The other thing, so collective organizing, we are looking at, how do people understand and acknowledge failure, because we are seeing failure all around us. Now, it's very important for us to help these people understand that failure, it's easy to say failure is just one step and then, all that stuff, but it's about, I think it's important to help SME business owners and others, that first is to acknowledge that failure is happening, and second is to see how quickly we can get these people back on their feet, uh, to make sense of this failure. So what is this failure doing to us? Is it destroying resources? Is it destroying our mental states? Is it destroying our, envisioned futures, and so on and so forth? So I think that's another space where a lot of research has to be done, and also a lot of things quickly in practice have to be brought about. And also we have to look at what kind of responses entrepreneurs can bring to such kind of disruptive changes. There's a lot of literature. This is not the first time society is facing big changes. So there is a lot of old experience. We can learn from that. So, so I think at the root, my big takeaway from this whole experience of talking with entrepreneurs over the last year is that we are not going to go back to an old normal. So if we are going to think about it, we are going to miss everything. The fact is to acknowledge that we are heading towards a new normal. The truth of the issue is that we don't know what this new normal is going to be.
Yeah, but
And so we have to kind of embrace this uncertainty and ambiguity that's coming, and be extremely adaptable and have our resourcefulness at its peak to see how we can constantly be agile in responding to this. So I think that's really where we need to spend our efforts as a society, both in research and in practice. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my reading so far.
No, it does. But sir, what I took away from this talk with you, research in entrepreneurship is a lot like research in life. You literally talked about a lot of philosophical aspects of life where you can't go back to new normal and rather old normal, if I should be accurate. And I look at it this way. Yes, we have to adapt. It is a new normal, but you can shape that new normal if you are willing to.
Yes.
And hey, you can suit it to your needs. If you thought something was wrong with the old world order, you can do that. And I, in my broad horizon view of just a little I know, I saw that historically speaking, every time something bad happens, some crash happens, some depression or some plague hits, the subsequent years is when some of the biggest businesses are born.
True.
And yeah, again, a depression hits or something else happens, those business go down and some new business pop up again.
I think
Definitely.
this pandemic is really forcing the whole education industry to rethink
Mm.
itself, and I'm sure so many more industries. I totally agree, and I think I like this idea of you saying that it's about shaping this new normal and what's your role in it. So my question to entrepreneurs is, what's your role in shaping this new normal? So if you can play your role, I think that's good enough.
Yeah, or else you can
Yeah.
just cry about it for the next 25, 30 years before
Yeah,
something like this happens again.
totally agree.
Yeah, so well said. It was wonderful chatting with you. It truly was. And it was really fun talking about the research side of entrepreneurship, which I really believe that a lot of people should know about and talk about. And it was great. It really was great. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
joining.
thanks, Pranay. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
So that's it from the interview, and I really hope you liked it. And more than that, I really hope you took away something valuable, because what Dr. Raj Shankar said is a lot of things which are maybe present already in history, or maybe research is already found out, yet people like us don't know about it in terms of business side. So if we apply those techniques, or if we apply these rules which they've built, maybe we can be successful as well as entrepreneurs, or maybe just in life. Because like he said, research entrepreneurship is a social science. Any research in that is like research on ourselves as human beings, and that is damn cool. So that's it from us this week. And if you did like the video, do like, share, and subscribe, the three very keys for my personal and our personal growth. And also from our side, I'd ask about, please, for all the people watching this, be safe for yourself and for your loved ones, and we will come out on top of this. So until I see you next time, stay safe, and bye bye from myself.